Well, Ron Brown getting ready to retire after almost 30 years of doing this, and over all of those years, Ron has shown a real dedication to do stories that are connected to the military, certainly because as a result of your service and the connection Southern Oregon has. And this particular story really struck not only with you, but others who live in our area.
Well, that's true, but this is a story that was a bit of a mystery involved with it, a lot of travel, but it was an all-day project to get this story, but it was one that probably took about 15 years and really paid off, and probably one of my favorite stories of all time. This windswept meadow high in the Pueblo Mountains, just north of the Nevada border, could be considered sacred ground. Not necessarily just by Native Americans, but also by the families of 11 American flyers who died here in a fiery plane crash back on February 9th, 1945.
The only eyewitness that I know of was a young woman, I think she was a teenager, living in Denio. She happened to look out the window and saw the plane's lights, or heard the plane noise coming over the mountain, saw the plane turn. For some reason, it already cleared the mountain, turn, and come back around the backside of the mountain into the area we're in right now. Apparently lost altitude dramatically, and I'm not sure if they're trying to land here because it's fairly level, although it'd be tough, or they just were trying to regain altitude and they just barely didn't make it up against this rocky face.
One local newspaper account says the crew was dropping flares to light up the ground below. Regardless, the next thing anybody saw was a fireball lighting up the chilly night sky and the sound of a huge explosion. It took 2 days for local ranchers and authorities to reach the scene on horseback here at the 7,500-foot elevation. Most of the plane was burned, and it took days to recover what remains could be found in the snow-covered meadow. It's now known as Propeller Flats or Propeller Meadows.
They recovered what they thought were the 9 people that were on the flight. So over the years, things got covered up, and 16 years ago, a couple of men were up here poking around and they found some human remains. They contacted the Harney County Sheriff, who contacted BLM.
The BLM contacted Army forensic specialists in Hawaii, and within days they had a crew here. For 2 weeks, they dug around the site, looking for more human remains and other identifying artifacts. That was in 1996.
They found watches, they found insignia, they found wings, like you would a collar, a lapel wing. They found ID bracelets, they found coins, they found a lot of human bone, and most of which had been obviously burned or partially burned.
After making DNA tests, the remains were interred at Arlington National Cemetery and the site put back the way it was before excavation. And this is what it looks like today. Sage and grass and pieces of a burned B-24 bomber littered all about.
We still have 4 engines here. Both the landing gear are here in various places. Everything's kind of scattered out and around. We have bits and pieces of the airframe.
The plane was on a training mission from Gowan Field in Boise down to California and back when it went down. After 66 years, you'd think there wouldn't be much of anything left up here in these mountains. But here's another piece of aluminum from the plane. You can see where the fire melted part of it, but part of it also survived. And here's a piece of plexiglass, still almost clear after all these years. Thomas says that although no one is buried here, it still seems like sacred ground.
I mean, it's not really a cemetery in the strict sense of the word. It's where 12 or 11 men died. So I consider it kind of a sacred spot. And it's historic because it's over 50 years old.
Thomas is concerned that there's now a jeep trail all the way to the site, which is in a wilderness study area. He only hopes others will respect the site for its historic value and not remove artifacts that have weathered 66 summers and winters here along the Oregon-Nevada border. Near Denio, Ron Brown, Newswatch 12.
A lot of the time what we do is just a day-by-day look at what's happening in our community, but 15 years it took you to put those pieces together.
And what it started from was the discovery of a couple extra bodies that had never been accounted for by some prospectors, and all the investigation that went into that, but it took 15 years before we were able to get up there, and a great deal of thanks to the BLM archaeologists. Came all the way down from Burns to the Nevada border, and we went up in there and showed us how to get in. And never would have found it otherwise because it wasn't where I expected it to be, and it's still there. That wreckage is still up on that mountaintop.
Well, you certainly have gone to some great heights and some great distances to get this story. working well later than you would expect for someone who gets to work before 4 a.m. Your dedication has been unparalleled, Ron. We will certainly miss you after you retire on May 29th. For a look at other stories that have had an impact on Ron, as well as those that have impacted the community the most, head to our website, kdrv.com, look under features for Ron Brown's Best, and join us tomorrow night on Newswatch 12 at 6:30 for another look at one of Ron's most impactful stories.